Welcome back to the Team to Beat Miami Heat podcast, your one-stop shop for daily Miami Heat content. I'm your host, Amir. Today, we have a great show lined up for you. I have a special guest joining me today. We have Jamal from And One Hoops and Bulls Central. So thanks for hopping on, Jamal.
Appreciate you having me, Amir. Looking forward to the discussion.
For sure. And so, Jamal, before we do get started, do you want to introduce yourself real quick to the audience and tell them a little bit about your channels?
Yeah. So for those that don't know me, Jamal Platooni. So I do Bull Central, which is a primarily focused, not primarily, it is focused on the actual Chicago Bulls. And then I do an And One Hoops channel, which is NBA content related. And yeah, it's been a journey. I've had the channel for about 4 years for the Bulls Central one, and One Hoops for a couple of years. So check it out.
I used to be a Bulls fan as I was a Jordan fan, like most kids in the 90s growing up. It didn't matter if you're living in New York or even Los Angeles. Like I've had friends who are actually in basketball cities. I grew up in Fresno, California, so we had no pro team. And so it's easier for me to gravitate towards Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But I've had friends who lived in New York and like were actually Bulls fans over the New York Knicks, which I think is insane if you actually live in a city like LA or New York. But it's
Well,
also fitting
it
that
shows the magnitude that Michael Jordan, the the gravity that he had across the entire basketball fan base, right? To draw in those kind of audiences from all over. And that's why I became a Bulls fan. I've stayed a Bulls fan ever since because of Michael Jordan. That's just my childhood hero for sure.
exactly like that he was our LeBron essentially for the
Right.
kids growing up in the 2000s or the late 90s and 2000s, the fans of Kobe Bryant. So,
For
and
sure.
it's also fitting the Heat are playing the Bulls today,
I know.
which
That's a
should be
good point.
fun. Are your we can get into the De'Aaron Fox trade, which I want to
For
ask your
sure.
opinion about. But yeah, it's fitting that we are playing against you guys, and it's actually kind of crazy that the Miami Heat are 3 games back from the 4th seed, even though Jimmy Butler has missed half of the season, and
Yeah.
part of that was because of injuries and obviously the suspensions, which we'll get into. But happy you're on again. Thank you again for your time. But yeah, the biggest thing I want to start off with, though, is obviously the Jimmy Butler piece. We are 2 days away, 3 days if you include today, from the NBA trade deadline. This has been probably one of the most historic trade deadlines in recent history. And right now, the Jimmy Butler situation, I think, is crazy because he's still on the Miami Heat. He's the one player that requested a trade. He's the one player that has been suspended. There's all this drama around that. Yet Fox got traded. He didn't request a trade. Luka got traded, which we'll talk about hopefully later, without requesting a trade. And yet Jimmy Butler is still here. And so you're a Chicago Bulls fan. You've dealt with Jimmy Butler drama in the past. What are your whole thoughts on this whole Jimmy Butler situation?
Well, the reason Jimmy hasn't been traded is because he only wants to go to one destination. And that's the
Exactly.
biggest thing. He wants to play in Phoenix, at least based on what reports are saying, and he only wants to play in Phoenix. Honestly, I think that's the biggest mistake for Jimmy. In a way, I kind of question his judgment because it sounds like there have been other offers, there have been other teams that have been interested, and he's rejected those, or he's turned them down. I'm surprised the Heat are kind of putting up with that because it's not like he has a no trade clause. You know what I mean? Like they can just say, well, too bad, this is what we're sending you because that's what we're going to do. That's what's best for our franchise. So that's been a little surprising to me. But that's part of the reason why he hasn't been moved is because he is dead set on going to Phoenix and only Phoenix. And it's the only team that he's committed to re-signing with long term. I don't see how he gets there because Bradley Beal has been like defiant and not waiving his no trade clause. And that is the only way Jimmy Butler gets to Phoenix. As far as like the drama with, Jimmy, so when Jimmy first came into the league, he was one of my favorite players because he was a super humble kid, came up from, small beginnings. He was kicked out early as a
Mm-hmm.
teenager by his parents. He was taken in by another family. Went to a small school. I think it was a junior college. Then he transferred to Marquette, was the last pick in the first round of the draft. So it was a great story in terms of how Jimmy Butler got to where he was. And he worked hard. Like, his rookie year, he barely played, but then he continued to work hard, got better on both ends of the floor, and turned himself into a star. I think what was interesting to me is that once Jimmy started getting really good and it became more his team and not Derrick Rose's team because Derrick Rose continued to get injured, I think it got to his head a little bit. And I think that was compounded by the fact that once Dwayne Wade came to the team, and I know it's kind of an unpopular opinion, but I feel like Dwayne made him a little Hollywood. And so now I just think that Jimmy Butler thinks he's a lot better than he actually is. He's an incredible player, competitor, works really hard, plays both sides of the floor. But I do think that there's a bit of a reality check that needs to sit with Jimmy Butler to say, like, okay, I'm not a Luka Doncic. I'm not a Kevin Durant. I'm not a LeBron James, Steph Curry. I'm not that type of player where I can just make these types of demands. And yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't really know what's going to happen with Jimmy. I feel like we're going to get past the deadline. He's still going to be with the team. But I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think because he's been with the Heat for a long time now. And obviously a very, different player than what he was when he was with the Bulls. Because I know Heat fans love him, but I'm curious to hear what they feel about him now, given everything that's transpired over the past few months.
I'm not going to take what he did in this 5 year. I'm not going to count this season, right? This is his 6th season with the Miami Heat. So in that 5-year run, I'm not going to take for granted what he did. I don't know if any other star could have taken this Miami Heat team to 2 finals with Gabe Vincent, with a Max Strus, with a Caleb Martin, with a Derrick Jones Jr., whoever. Insert any other undrafted cheap contract that we could have put around him. Obviously, we tried to get pieces around him. He wanted Kyle Lowry. That was his friend. He was the best, most coveted player during free agency. We tried to get Victor Oladipo. That didn't work out. We got PJ Tucker. We've tried to help him, but I don't think the Miami Heat's front office has done enough. So they're not blameless. But Jimmy Butler also is not blameless either in terms of his formula that has helped get us to the finals multiple times. Yeah. But he doesn't take the regular season serious. Like he load manages, he misses 20 games per season. So, but like for him to not be that elite superstar, like you mentioned, especially in the regular season, and to take this Miami Heat that far, like I love Jimmy Butler forever. I still do. But currently, like he's just burning every bridge right now. Like I don't understand his playbook right now, like what he's doing with his agent and his camp right now, forcing the Miami Heat, I guess forcing, it's not the right word, but trying to force his way to the Phoenix Suns. And you mentioned it earlier, Bradley Beal has one of the worst contracts in the NBA. He has the 5th highest contract in the NBA. He's nowhere near a top 5 guy. He's talking about injury prone, missing games. Like he's been missing 30 plus games since he was 27 years old. So, I love Jimmy Butler. I'm thankful for what he did. Before he took it this far and got suspended 3 times, giving up on his teammates, calling out Spoelstra, leaving practice, being a complete distraction to the team, not doing this in the quiet, basically saying we should have got this done in the offseason, but he could have done this behind closed doors, not ruined his trade value, saying, hey, just try to get me to a contender. Try to get me to the Suns or the Warriors or whatever. Like if it was amicable, I'd be happy. But I don't know, man, how I honestly feel today. Because before all this happened, when we requested a trade, I'm like, I get it. I understand the Jimmy build is over. I want him to win a championship. As a Heat fan, I'm like, wherever he goes. But now I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. But I don't hate him. I just hate the situation. So, and I don't know how it ends either, but I don't think there's a world where he can come back. After the first suspension, he got suspended 7 games. I thought he was done then. I thought there's no way he's going to play again. He came back and played the game against the Pelicans and the Pacers. He didn't really try. Then you request the trade. He still gets suspended again. Like I don't see him coming back after a 3rd suspension. I don't know. But I don't see him going to the Suns either, because you mentioned it. Bradley Beal, is that truly an untradeable contract in your opinion? Is there a world where, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but maybe I do after this Luka trade, because we can talk about that. But is there any rigging where they could be like, hey, Bradley, we'll give you some money under the table if you waive it to go to X, Y, and Z team? Is there a world where that even happens? Or do you really think he does end up ends up back with the Miami Heat? Because I don't see that happening.
I mean, when it comes to behind the, under the table type deals, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure maybe stuff like that exists in the NBA. I find it hard to believe, because if it ever came out, it would just absolutely destroy the league's credibility.
Same. I agree.
But that contract, like you talked about, it is the worst contract in the NBA, not even just from the actual salary itself, but also because of the no trade clause, because he has all the control with that, right? So any team, even if they say they were interested in bringing in Bradley Beal, they were willing to take on a bad contract because maybe, the Suns would throw a first round pick or a couple, to take on his deal. It's like, but then he has control. It's like, how are we able to flip him? Maybe not, because he has a no trade clause. So I think that makes it the worst contract. But that's the thing. That's the only scenario where Jimmy Butler would go to Phoenix is if Bradley Beal is included in the trade, because they're not going to trade Booker. They're not going to trade Kevin Durant. I will say I could see there being an outside chance that the Warriors make a play at him. So there have been reports, right, that
Yep.
the Warriors actually have been trying to work with Jimmy Butler with the Heat to try to work out a Jimmy Butler trade. Jimmy Butler, I guess, initially said, no, he doesn't want to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if, the hours leading up to the deadline, because like you said, Jimmy doesn't want to come back to Miami. It would be a massive distraction if they don't move him before the deadline. He might give in and say, okay, fine. Like I'll go to Golden State. I'll commit to staying there, right? Because that's the thing. Golden State doesn't want to trade for him if he's just going to leave in free agency. So I could see something like that happening. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, these next 48 plus hours are going to be interesting to see what's sort of next. I will say, the Heat, like you mentioned, they should not be absolved of any blame. They haven't really done him any favors as far as building around him when they had, Damian Lillard wanted to go to Miami and they weren't able to get a deal done because they were too, stuck in their own ways as far as, well, we're not just going to trade the world for him because we know he wants to come here. Well, Portland said, well, screw you. We're going to send him into Milwaukee, right? It's a free agency destination, Miami is, or, any, disgruntled superstar that's looking for a trade, right? They want to go to Miami and they haven't been able to get anybody. And that's on the Heat's front office, right? Because it's like, you already got Jimmy Butler. You had a team that went to the finals 2 years in a short time period. You should be able to get some big names to come there, and they didn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, the Miami Heat front office dropped the bag on the Dame situation. Dame's agent also fumbled when he basically said he only wants to go to the Miami Heat. That's where the NBA then got involved. Basically, they sent out that memo.
Oh, that's right. Forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the only superstar that has requested a trade, wanted to go to a specific team. He should have mentioned maybe a few other options, because I guess everybody else, like Kevin Durant, said Phoenix or Miami.
Right.
Harden has said, Brooklyn or whatever. A couple, they usually give at least like 2 to 4. Jimmy did the same thing earlier where he said Dallas, Houston, what was it, Mavericks and the Suns. Or I already said that twice. Those Warriors, Houston, Dallas, and the Suns. So like he gave multiple options at first. Like his agent didn't do that. So I guess that's part of the reason why he got reprimanded. But
right.
Joe Cronin didn't want to talk to us. Apparently, like the front office said that, like, yeah, we tried, but they wouldn't answer the phone. But they didn't answer the phone because Pat Riley, is stubborn and arrogant, and has tried to fleece teams in the past. So let's switch gears though real quick to the De'Aaron Fox trade. So that was a expected trade. I didn't expect it to happen so soon. It wasn't a guarantee. We knew that his preferred destination, again, a player had a preferred destination. He got there. He didn't even request a trade, and he still got to the team he wanted to go to. But he preferred to go to the Spurs. De'Aaron Fox now is paired up with Victor Wembanyama. So what are your thoughts on that real quick? But on the side piece, obviously, Zach Lavine from your team, the Chicago Bulls, was involved in that trade. He has been in trade rumors and speculation since the offseason. They wanted to offload. It seems like they finally picked a direction where they actually do want to rebuild. And Zach Lavine is now on the Sacramento Kings, reunited with DeMar DeRozan. I don't think you guys got a good enough package, but it still shows that you guys were just trying to get off his long-term max contract, taking on contracts from younger guys who are going to expire, not this season maybe, but the following season. So it looks like you guys are trying to open up cap space for that 2026 season. But just what are your thoughts on Fox to the Spurs and that fit, and then how that impacted the Bulls and their future build?
Yeah, I mean, I love the trade for the Spurs because I do think that the fit is great. I know that De'Aaron Fox was saying he feels that he's the perfect fit, right? That this was sort of his ideal destination in terms of creating a championship contending team for years in the future. I don't know if I'll go that far. I mean, I need to see how it works out, but just on paper, that duo is going to be incredible. the reason I like it for the Spurs so much is they didn't really have to give up that much. I
Right.
thought at minimum for De'Aaron Fox, because in my view, I mean, he's an all-star. He's one of the best point guards in the league. That they would have had to give up, one of their young players, Castle, Sohan, maybe even that pick that they have from Atlanta that's unprotected. They didn't have to give up any of that. They were able to keep all of that and still bring in De'Aaron Fox. They gave the Bulls their pick back that they mistakenly should have never traded to begin with. So that was of no real consequence to them, because the Bulls were probably going to be able to keep that pick at least for this upcoming draft anyway, based on where they are in the standings. And then, the picks that they sent to the Kings, they're not great for, I know it's 3 first-round picks. Everyone keeps calling it 3 first-round picks. One of them was from the Hornets, which is lottery protected. The Hornets aren't going to be making the playoffs, so that's going to be, I think, 2 second-round picks. The 2027 pick to the Spurs, I think it's 2031 pick to the Timberwolves. Those could be interesting, but I mean, what they got for Fox is really good value, and it's going to be a good fit. For the Bulls, I mean, it's like you said, this had been going on for some time, where they had been shopping Zach Lavine for a while. And I think we all knew that it was eventually going to come. We also knew that the haul was not going to be great, because under the new CBA, it's very challenging to move max level players who are great. And Zach Lavine is having an incredible season. I think he should have been an all-star. But obviously there are concerns about, whether or not he's a winning player. I personally think he's a winning player, but I also see that why other teams wouldn't, because he's never really been a part of a winning organization. Not really on him. It's the roster construction around him. And so trying to move that contract is going to be difficult. I guess I try to put it into perspective. Over the offseason, there was talk that the only way to move Zach Lavine's contract was if you attached a first-round pick to it. They were able to get off his contract by bringing their overall first-round draft pick back that they were sending to the Spurs, which was a critical pick, because now they don't have to worry about, how much do we need to tank in order to be able to, retain that pick and not have it
lottery protected? So it was lottery protected?
It was top 10 protected.
Okay.
The Bulls pick was top 10 protected. And then if it did not convey this season, it would be top 8 protected in 2026 and 27. So it was like they would have had to tank for a long time in order to just retain that pick. Eventually it was going to go to the Spurs. So in a way, they got a first-round pick back, but it was their own first-round pick that they should have never traded to begin with.
Yeah.
I don't like the fit, though, with Zach Lavine going to the Kings. And to be honest, I don't really know what the Kings were thinking either. I don't know if they just hadn't watched the Bulls at all these past 3 years. I love DeMar DeRozan. I love Zach Lavine. Them together, it just didn't work, for a number of reasons. And could have been Zach and DeMar as far as whose turn, who was going to be the number one option, right? It was a your turn, my turn type thing. DeMar, obviously a player that likes the ball in his hands, plays primarily in the half court, is an isolation type player. And so Zach Lavine, whereas a guy that can score at all 3 levels, likes to spread the floor. He can play off the ball, but he also likes to have the ball in his hands. It was never a good fit with those 2 guys. And so that's why I was shocked when I saw that the Kings were making the trade to bring in Zach Lavine. And I'm actually curious to see how Zach feels about it, because I always got sort of the vibe in the sense that he wasn't really happy when, DeMar was with the organization. I'm not saying that, he was vocal about it, right? He never came out and publicly said like, oh, I don't like playing with DeMar or anything like that. But there was kind of a reason why he was looking to maybe go to a different destination last season. And so now he's paired up with DeMar again. Domantas Sabonis, I think he's obviously better than Nikola Vucevic, but similarities there, right, from a center perspective. So I don't really like the fit for the Kings. And I think that they should have been able to get more for their franchise player, their star player in De'Aaron Fox.
I agree. Yeah. I feel like they probably had to do some sort of balance between probably a soft build, because you still have Sabonis, you still have Malik Monk,
Right.
you still have Murray and a few other pieces. DeMar, I would have rather had a blue chip prospect. You're not going to get Castle, I guess. I mean, you should get Castle in theory,
Right.
like for that trade because De'Aaron Fox is in his prime. He's 27 years old.
Right. Right.
They say once a player gets to 26, 27, from 26, 27 to 30ish, that's like once they get that second contract, that's typically their prime, like their best part of their prime, right? So
Right.
I don't think they got the best package. I mean, I like Zach Lavine, but how old is he? 20, 29?
Zach
Like
Lavine's
20.
29. He'll be 30 in March.
Yeah, I probably would have rather had like a 3-and-D type player, someone like a Finney Smith type of player with a
Right.
contract that's making, 15 to 20 million plus a draft pick plus or multiple draft picks, which they got. And then I don't know who they would have gotten, because obviously Spurs weren't willing to give up Castle. But if there was another team where you could have gotten some sort of young prospect, I think it
Yeah.
would have made more sense. Because I think Malik Monk is not as good as De'Aaron Fox, but the Kings weren't going anywhere anyway, right? So like he
That's
can
what
kind of hold the throne with DeMar and Sabonis for now. So at least like get some like have a blended build, which I know you're upset about, probably just like us Heat fans trying to do this blended build. I think
Yeah.
the Bulls were trying to similar to Miami, where we're trying to get Jaime Jaquez involved, Jovic involved,
Right.
Jimmy Butler involved, instead of like biting the bullet and getting a star next to Jimmy Butler. I think you guys were kind of doing that as well when you had
Yeah.
DeMar, Levine, you brought in Lonzo, but you guys at least have a path and a direction now. And Miami Heat's going to have a direction hopefully soon too, once we get rid of Jimmy Butler. And now you guys can focus more on a youth movement because you guys are still going to try to get rid of Lonzo and Vucevic, right? So are they looking for just second round capital? And we'll close on this. What do you think? Where do you think they will go, and what do you think we'll get in return for those two guys?
I don't think Lonzo's going to get traded. I know the Bulls are trying to look for a trade for him. I think that teams are going to be very unwilling to give up draft capital for a player with his injury history. That said, I do think that he could fit on any roster. Would be incredible for a contending team because
What about Miami? Sorry to cut you off. What about Miami? Include that.
I mean, is Miami willing to give up second round picks to bring on Lonzo Ball?
We don't have any picks, honestly. Really, we
I
have
was going
one
to say, yeah,
first and like a couple second round picks. So I don't know, but
yeah. I think he would be a great fit in Miami. I think he would fit the culture really well. I mean, he's a high IQ player, and he's getting his shot back now, so that 3-point shooting is there. He's a tenacious defender. I just have a hard time seeing a team willing to make an offer for him, even though it's an expiring contract. But teams are going to be wary to give up assets to get him, especially when they know that he's going to be a free agent anyway in the summer. I don't think the Bulls are going to re-sign him, so they might be able to get him on like a vet minimum deal. Vucevic, I do think will eventually be traded. I think that the package is going to be pretty small, even though he's actually having a much better season than he had last year, probably his best season since he's been in Chicago.
Yeah.
But at his age, at his contract, because he still has another year left on his deal where he's going to be making $20 million next season, you might get a second round pick or two. I know the Bulls are aiming to try to get a first round pick. I just don't think that's realistic. And, knowing this Bulls front office, they've been at the helm for 4 or 5 years now. They overvalue their players, and it's come to bite them quite often. And I hope that it's not going to be another situation where they try to move Vooch, right? And it's, they want too much. And then the deal passes, right? Because people are looking like, yeah, we're not going to give you a first round pick for Nikola Vucevic. Are you crazy? And so the Bulls just hold on to him. And then, the offseason comes around and then his value is even lower. So that's my hope that doesn't happen. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it does. My guess is Vooch gets traded for, second round draft capital. Lonzo probably stays with the team until the summer. That's my take.
Dude, if Vucevic, who's averaging, I know he's 34, relatively friendly-ish contract for the numbers he's putting up.
Yeah,
20 and 10. He's averaging 20 and 10 and shooting 40% from 3. And you're talking about second round picks. Like this CBA is insane. Like what it's done to the ability of moving players that are having really good, like it's crazy. And Lonzo's probably gonna be a buyout candidate, right? Possibly, right. I think so. He might hit the buyout market, but it's just kind of wild that yes, Vucevic is getting older. He's not as mobile as he used to be. He's never been a plus defender, but he's someone that can contribute to a contending team, averaging 20 and 10. And you're like, it's just sad reality that you're like, I'm happy to get a second round pick. Like it is what it is at this point, right? Like it's just tough to move players with contracts of this size that are not stars. So
yeah, the Bulls would have been able to move Zach Lavine over a year ago had it not been for the new CBA.
Yeah, easily. Jimmy
easily.
Butler would be
And
on the Suns right now if they could aggregate players. The Miami Heat would be like, all right, give us 2 of those 3 first-round
right,
picks, give
right.
us Grayson Allen, give us Tyus Jones, give us whatever it is to make up the
Yeah.
money, give us Nurkic, whatever it is. Like, just take it. Give us picks in those 4 players.
Yeah.
They can't aggregate, right? They're in the second apron team, so
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the next CBA is going to look. There's probably going to be a lot of pushback from owners and teams about how this is impeding a lot of movement, which I guess is designed. The league wants it that way, right? So, but
maybe
yeah,
it'll be like the NFL, no guaranteed contracts either. So for
there you go.
all these people that are getting injured too, it's like you're
Right.
sitting out, you're doing load management, but it's not working. Like
Yeah.
players are still getting injured even with load management. So anyway, thank you so much for hopping on the show, Jamal. I really appreciate your time. And again, before we hop off, just remind the audience where they can find you, and if you want to plug your Twitter or anything else, just let the audience know.
Yeah, no, appreciate you having me on, man. Yeah, everyone, you can find me at Bull Central, M1 Hoops. My Twitter handle is Bull Central YT. So appreciate it, Amir. This was great, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Thank you again.
For sure.